It's never going to be very easy, if it will at all happen, to describe or certify or in any way grapple with the intensity of the occult phenomenon for which I was groomed by Bernard Whitemaker, an Attica State Prison psychiatrist, and Roger Waters, and a brutal British eccentric artist in rock music. When I was captured as a child after my father abandoned us and went into philosophy of public schools in Pittsburgh. I was deafened, for one thing, and impacted with a neuroplasm that drove what was happening into. I was pretty lingual when it went on, so I didn't really have the language skills to articulate what was happening. It was driven into neuroconic amnesia. I literally physically couldn't remember what happened without going into seizures. It was a wall and not neuroplasm. Most of the information I've put into the public domain pertains to the traumatic ordeal that forced us to move, and then the way I got mixed up with a valedictorian from a girls' school and was jilted by her because I was starting to get old enough to write about things, and I wrote about that, which is part of the grooming process. Of course, I didn't understand that at the time. Nobody was caring very much about me. It was a widespread practical joke. I was betrayed by many, many peers. As an old man, I live in isolation. The gangs that tend to me through Medicare are just politically aligned to Obama. The people who did it to me protected Wattenmaker. Most of them. I can't speak for everybody. Obviously, I'm not trying to speak for everybody. Some people are supportive, but it's paid support. I don't have people who really care about me. People don't send me Christmas cards or anything like that. When I had a heart care emergency, I got one card from a Japanese man. I was going to baseball with. So, what they called Casper was an idea that media would make demands in the name of Ronald Reagan and Ringo Starr on how I represented the brutality and torture that I endured as a child. And they wouldn't allow me to tell the truth. They were going to prior script how it was represented. And they called this reuniting with the spirit and fulfillment of the will of Lenin. So we know that the fascist element of Casper was very fascist. It came from Hitler himself. And Lenin was like the soothsayer who redeemed Hitler with Jesus, and they became Casper, a synthesis. We know that from the names in the operation. But it was very occult. And it preyed on the fact that I had never been able to talk to anybody about what happened. So many people could claim they didn't know that it happened and didn't believe that it happened. As late as 2012, when I was 52 years old, a lockup who had despicably sided with the blackout even when a bystander was murdered. And they arrested me, said I was making up or imagined, or how did they put it, believed I was kidnapped and tortured as a child, as though something like that could be made up. There's no way to deny it. I mean, pleading for help in the office was surely remembered and documented. The disappearance for months, the hiding in the towel closet, the biting my fingernails bloody, the begging people for help every which way, the trips to the police department, to the principal's office. It's not that easy to cover up something as conspicuous as trauma and deafness in a terrorized child pleading for help, but they managed to do it anyway. Now, Seattle's role in this is the crafty manipulation of ideology that comes from those who only care about the pitches that they're making and the platforms that they're making for advancement of their notions of a religious cause. Christianity, forgiveness is all this stuff. I talked to a woman from the Graham Foundation, surprisingly enough, who said if you forgave these terrible people, would they at least leave you alone? Of course, that was not the way it operates. The Veterans Administration, the Postal Union, the so-called peers form, you know, cliques, and they exclude me from these cliques. And they say that they have the blessings of the rock stars and they have the blessings and that they know the truth. And they sweep under the carpet when there's a crime by one of them, try to distance themselves from the person who perpetuated the crime a little bit. Like when John Schulman was arrested, all sorts of people were implicated in that. I was the one who tried to get away from that because I was aware by then that he was committing crimes and started reporting my suspicions to the Postal Service that he was defrauding them. They said, no, 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 you're spreading rumors about distinguished people. Then Smithsonian busted him with like $8 million he ripped off from the museum. These were the people who confiscated my art and made up stories about me. Really, really scurrilous stories. Like, could have saved John Lennon. I mean, where did they get that one? From Lennon himself, apparently. He was apparently the witch doctor behind the Casper stuff and staged his murder in a Houdini. And the evidence for that is very simple. Their device was some letters I got from Israel. And they never arrested the girl who wrote the letters. And they never even pretended that I ever understood the letters. So it's deviancy that came from Wattenmaker, who was an Attica Zionist on their neuropsychiatric team, and Pink Floyd, The Walrus. And they're like, if you want to be forgiven, you will forgive. And that's like Hitler saying, you think you're better than us, which was something the Yenzers who dragged me through glass and tortured me as a child, gassed me, and really put me through ferociously diabolical Manson ordeals. Used to say, you think you're better than us. And the reason they tagged me for this was I mean, Pittsburgh calls me disloyal because I point out that Ronald and Casper were the names of the men who attacked me, just like Reagan and Weinberger many years earlier. I looked into the script, and she was working with the gang that was producing Reagan's movies and so on. And he never bothered to arrest her. He just picked on me. But they get away with saying that their advocacy for the script is very clearly about the murder of the Kennedys and King. It says so. They get away with advocating for the murders of the President of the United States in a revenge attack by Yoko Ono over Hiroshima on the little boy from the U.S. Navy. And so that's what they're driving at with, you think you're better than us. Look what you did, used on us. Well, it's beside the point that I wouldn't. They put, me in the hot seat of their turnaround system. We'll give you another chance. This time you accept the crucifixion as penitence for the um, sins of Christopher Columbus. This all comes from not just the occultists around Peter Gabriel and King Crimson, which it does come from them. Those are people who openly, stridently rub my face in it. But it also comes from Seattle stuff. And so nobody wants to befriend me on my own terms. So I'm sort of used to that and stuff. I've been like this alone for a long time. But the occult phenomenon of trauma, and like Gabriel prayed on it when he used me on that song, that album. So he said, pulling at the papers from the drawers that slide smooth, tugging at the darkness word upon word. He knew about Gail Burson's letters, in other words, before they even claimed to find them. Because the Houdini element, the Ouspensky, the spirit, the Casper from beyond was part of the conjuring. Hootenanny.